You're still waiting?
My father told me you'd probably say that.
Really? And who exactly is your father? This can't be.
5 hours earlier, Hawthorne Industries was exactly what people expected from one of America's most successful companies. Polished marble floors, spotless glass walls, and employees moving with the confidence of people who believed they worked for the best. No one noticed the woman who quietly stepped through the revolving doors just after 9 o'clock that morning. She wasn't dressed like an executive. She wasn't carrying an expensive handbag. She wore a neatly pressed navy blue coat, carried a weathered leather purse, and held a faded envelope so carefully that it looked as though it was worth more than everything else she owned. Her name was Elena Brooks. She paused just inside the entrance and looked around the enormous lobby. It had been almost 20 years since she had last stood inside this building. Back then, she had been a little girl holding her father's hand. Today, she had returned alone. The receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning, welcome to Hawthorne Industries, how may I help you?" Elena smiled politely. "I need to see Mr. Adrian Cole." The receptionist typed his name into the computer. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "I'm sorry, ma'am, Mr. Cole doesn't meet with visitors without an appointment." Elena lowered her eyes to the envelope. "I understand. But I promised my father I would place this letter directly into his hands." The receptionist sighed. "Who is your father?" Elena hesitated for just a moment. "I'm afraid that isn't something I can explain." The receptionist folded her arms. "Then I'm afraid I can't help you." Most people would have argued. Some would have demanded to see a manager. Others would have walked away in frustration. Elena did none of those things. Instead, she thanked the receptionist, walked quietly to the waiting area, and sat down. She placed the envelope carefully on her lap. Then she waited. Not because she believed waiting would change anyone's mind, but because 18 years earlier she had made a promise to a man whose final words had never left her heart. "No matter how long it takes, don't leave until Adrian Cole reads my letter." She intended to keep that promise, even if it meant sitting there until the building closed. If you enjoy emotional stories filled with shocking secrets, powerful justice, and unforgettable endings, please like, comments, and subscribe now. At exactly 9:15 that morning, Elena Brooks quietly folded her hands over the worn envelope resting on her lap. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't impatient. She simply watched the revolving doors as employees hurried in and out, each one too busy to notice the woman who had already begun changing the course of their day. The receptionist looked at her every few minutes, expecting her to give up. She never did. Around 10 o'clock, a young office assistant approached the reception desk carrying a stack of files. He glanced toward Elena. "Has she been sitting there this whole time?" The receptionist nodded. "She says she needs to see the CEO." The assistant laughed. "So does half the country." The receptionist smiled. "I've already told her he doesn't meet people without appointments." The assistant looked at Elena once more before walking away. If she hasn't figured that out by now, she probably never will. Elena heard every word. She simply lowered her eyes to the envelope again. It wasn't pride keeping her in that chair. It wasn't desperation either. It was a promise. A promise made inside a quiet hospital room 3 days before her father took his final breath. She could still hear his weak voice as though he were sitting beside her. "No matter what happens, don't argue with him. Don't beg. Don't defend me. Just make sure Adrian Cole reads my letter." She had asked him the same question over and over again. "Dad, what's inside it?" Every time. He smiled. "If I tell you, the letter loses its purpose." She had never opened it. Not once. Not even after his funeral. Not even during the 18 years she kept it hidden inside a small wooden box beneath her bed. Because she trusted her father more than her own curiosity. At 11:30, the receptionist's phone rang. She straightened immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Cole." "Yes, sir. I'll let them know." She hung up, then looked toward Elena. "I'm sorry. The CEO has back-to-back meetings all day." He won't be available. Most people would have accepted defeat. Elena simply smiled. I understand. The receptionist frowned. You understand? Yes. My father also said today would be the hardest day. For the first time that morning, the receptionist's expression changed. There was something about the woman's calmness that didn't make sense. She wasn't angry. She wasn't frustrated. She wasn't acting like someone trying to force her way into the office of one of the most powerful CEOs in America. It was almost as though she already knew exactly how the day would end. That feeling stayed with the receptionist long after she returned to her computer. Because deep inside, she couldn't shake the thought that perhaps the quiet woman sitting alone in the lobby knew something everyone else didn't. At exactly 12:15, Adrian Cole walked into the executive boardroom on the 23rd floor. To the outside world, he was everything people admired. 46 years old. CEO of Hawthorne Industries. Featured on magazine covers. A regular speaker at business conferences. The man who had doubled the company's value in less than 6 years. People called him a visionary. What they didn't know was that Adrian hated surprises. Every meeting, every phone call, every visitor had to appear on his calendar. If it wasn't scheduled, it didn't exist. He had lived by that rule ever since his father's death 18 years earlier. A death he never spoke about, not even to his closest executives. As the quarterly board meeting began, Adrian stood confidently at the front of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. Today marks another record-breaking year for Hawthorne Industries. Applause filled the room. Charts appeared on the giant screen. Profits. Expansion. New acquisitions. Everything looked perfect. Then, a soft knock interrupted the presentation. Every head turned. The receptionist stepped inside, looking uncomfortable. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Cole. You asked not to be disturbed. I did, Adrian replied sharply. She hesitated. There's still a woman waiting downstairs. A few executives exchanged amused smiles. Adrian sighed. She's still here. Yes, sir. I've explained the policy several times. And she refuses to leave. One board member laughed quietly. Must be another investor looking for free money. Another added. Or someone hopping for a donation. The room chuckled. Adrian closed his laptop. Tell her the answer is still no. The receptionist nodded. Then paused. Sir. She said something else. Adrian looked up. What? The receptionist swallowed. She said, my father promised Mr. Cole would eventually remember. The room fell silent. For the first time that day, Adrian's expression changed. Only for a second. So quickly that nobody else seemed to notice. Nobody. Except Walter Graham, the oldest member of the board. Walter had worked beside Adrian's father for almost 30 years. He watched Adrian carefully. Then quietly asked, did she happen to mention her father's name? The receptionist shook her head. No, sir. Walter leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. Interesting. Adrian immediately regained his composure. It doesn't matter. He looked back at the receptionist. Tell security to escort her off the property. The receptionist hesitated. Sir. She's been completely respectful. She hasn't caused any problems. I don't care. His voice became firmer. This company doesn't operate on emotion. It operates on policy. Escort her out. The receptionist quietly left the room. The door closed behind her. But something about the conversation lingered. Walter slowly removed his glasses. He stared at Adrian for several long seconds. Then said something no one in that room expected. Your father would have invited her upstairs. Silence. Adrian didn't answer. Walter stood. I knew your father better than anyone. And I know one thing. He never judged people by the clothes they wore. Or by whether they had an appointment. Adrian forced a smile. This discussion is over. Walter nodded. No. He said quietly. I don't think it is. Downstairs. Two security officers slowly approached Elena. Neither of them looked comfortable. The older guard stopped a few feet away. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. The CEO has asked us to escort you off the property." Elena looked up at both men and smiled. Not an angry smile. Not a defeated one. Just the smile of someone who had expected those exact words. She carefully picked up the envelope. "I understand." She stood without resistance and walked toward the entrance. The entire lobby watched. Some employees shook their heads. Others exchanged amused glances. One young intern quietly whispered, "I actually feel bad for her." Another employee shrugged. She should have known when to give up. As Elena reached the revolving doors, she suddenly stopped. Not because she wanted to argue, but because she noticed something hanging on the wall. It was an old black and white photograph. Almost everyone walked past it every day without paying attention. Elena stared at it for several seconds. Then, very gently, she reached out and touched the corner of the frame. One of the security guards frowned. "Do you know that picture?" Elena smiled without taking her eyes off it. "I've seen it before." The guard looked surprised. "You have?" She nodded. "My father kept a copy of this photograph in our house." The guard looked back at the wall. The photograph showed the founder of Hawthorne Industries standing beside a group of construction workers on the day the company's first factory opened. Dozens of faces. Most impossible to recognize. The guard looked at Elena again. "Which one was your father?" She slowly lifted one finger and pointed to a young man standing in the very back row. His work clothes were covered in dust. One hand rested on a wooden toolbox. The other held his hard hat against his chest. The security guard leaned closer. There was no name beneath the man's face. Only one faded caption. "The men who built Hawthorne Industries, 1988. Before either guard could say another word, a quiet voice came from behind them. "I haven't seen that photograph in years." Everyone turned. Walter Graham was standing a few feet away. His eyes never left the picture. Then, he looked at the man Elena had pointed to. His expression slowly changed. He stepped closer, almost afraid to ask, "What did you say your father's name was?" For the first time all day, Elena answered, "My father was." She paused. "Michael Brooks." Walter's face turned completely white. His lips trembled. "No," he whispered. "Michael had a daughter." Walter Graham couldn't take his eyes off Elena. For a moment, the busy lobby disappeared around him. The voices, the ringing phones, even the footsteps. Everything faded into silence. He stared at her face as though he were searching for someone he had known long ago. Finally he spoke. "Your father, did he have green eyes?" Elena nodded slowly. "Yes." Walter closed his eyes. In a small scar just above his right eyebrow. Again she nodded. "He got it while repairing an old machine. He used to joke that the machine won." Walter let out a quiet laugh. A laugh that quickly turned into a sigh. "My goodness. It really is Michael." The security guards exchanged confused looks. One of them asked, "You knew her father?" Walter looked at the old photograph again. "Knew him." He smiled sadly. "Without Michael Brooks, there would be no Hawthorne Industries." The lobby fell silent. Even the receptionist looked up from her desk. Walter walked closer to the photograph. People remember founders. They remember CEOs. They remember the names on the buildings. But they almost never remember the people who sacrificed everything before anyone else believed. He gently touched Michael's face in the photograph. "Your father was one of those people." Elena swallowed hard. "My father never talked about this company." Walter looked surprised. "He did." She shook her head. "The only thing he ever said was, 'If anyone remembers me, I hope it's because I kept my word.'" Walter's smile disappeared. Those words struck him like a bolt of lightning. Because he had heard them before. Almost 20 years earlier. The night Michael Brooks walked out of Hawthorne Industries for the very last time. Walter whispered to himself. He remembered. He actually kept his promise. Before Elena could ask what he meant. The elevator doors opened again. Adrian Cole stepped into the lobby, surrounded by board members leaving the meeting. He stopped the moment he saw Walter standing beside Elena. His voice was cold. "Walter, I thought I made myself clear." Walter slowly turned to face him. "You did. But I don't think you understand who you're sending away." Adrian sighed impatiently. "I don't have time for this." Walter took one step forward. "No. You don't have time to keep running from your father's past." The smile vanished from Adrian's face. For the first time all day, he looked genuinely unsettled. Walter pointed toward the envelope still resting in Elena's hands. "If Michael Brooks trusted his daughter to carry that letter for 18 years, I suggest you read it before you make the biggest mistake of your life." Adrian looked at the envelope, then at Elena, then back at Walter. For the first time, he wasn't sure what to do. The lobby was so quiet that the sound of Adrian Cole's footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Every employee stopped pretending to work. Every conversation ended. Even the reception phones continued ringing unanswered. No one wanted to miss what was happening. Adrian walked slowly toward Elena. His eyes never left the envelope. It looked ordinary. Old. Worn around the edges. The corners were bent from years of careful handling. Yet somehow, it felt heavier than anything he had ever held. He stopped only a few feet away. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. "Did your father ever tell you what was inside?" Elena gently shook her head. "No. He made me promise I'd never open it. Not even after he passed away." Adrian frowned. "You carried a sealed letter for 18 years. Without knowing what it says." She nodded. "My father kept every promise he ever made. The least I could do was keep mine." Those words struck Adrian harder than he expected. Because he remembered someone else who used to speak exactly like that. His own father. Walter quietly stepped beside him. "Read it." Adrian looked down at the envelope. His fingers hesitated over the brittle seal. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of losing a business deal. He was afraid of finding the truth. Slowly, he opened the envelope. Inside, there wasn't one letter. There were two. The first was addressed to him. The second had never been opened. Across the front, written in the same unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "To Elena Brooks." Elena's eyes widened. She looked at Walter. "I've never seen that before." Walter stared at the second envelope in disbelief. "Michael, you never told her." Adrian looked back and forth between the two envelopes. His breathing grew heavier. "What is this?" Walter didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Neither of them did. The only person who had ever known the truth had been gone for 18 years. Adrian carefully unfolded the first letter. His eyes stopped on the very first sentence. His lips parted. He read it again. Then a third time. Walter noticed the color draining from Adrian's face. "What does it say?" Adrian couldn't speak. The paper slipped from his trembling hand and drifted silently onto the polished floor. Walter picked it up. His own eyes scanned the first line. A tear rolled down his cheek. He looked at Adrian, then at Elena, and whispered, "He never stopped protecting us." Walter carefully unfolded the letter. The paper had turned yellow with age. The ink had faded, but every word was still clear. Walter looked at Adrian. "You should read this yourself." Adrian swallowed hard. His voice trembled as he began reading aloud. "Dear Adrian, if this letter has reached you, it means Michael Brooks kept the final promise he made to me." Adrian paused. He looked up at Walter. Walter slowly nodded. "Keep reading." Adrian continued. "For years, you've believed this company survived because of my leadership. That isn't true." The room became completely silent. 18 years ago, Hawthorne Industries was days away from bankruptcy. The banks had already refused another loan. Our largest client had withdrawn. I was ready to tell hundreds of employees they no longer had jobs. Adrian's hands began to shake. He had never heard this story before. His father had never mentioned it. He kept reading. That same night, one man walked into my office after everyone else had gone home. His name was Michael Brooks. Elena lowered her head. Tears filled her eyes. Michael wasn't an executive. He wasn't an investor. He was one of our maintenance workers. Several employees exchanged shocked looks. Adrian's voice grew quieter. He placed every dollar his family had saved on my desk. Keep the factory open, he told me. People need their jobs more than I need this money. The receptionist covered her mouth. One of the security guards looked away. No one had expected this. Adrian struggled to continue. I refused his money. But Michael refused to take it back. His faith gave me the courage to keep fighting. The following week, a new investor saved the company. History will remember me as the founder. But in my heart, Michael Brooks saved Hawthorne Industries. Adrian stopped reading. His eyes filled with tears. Walter quietly said, I told you. There would be no Hawthorne Industries without him. Adrian looked at Elena. I never knew. She nodded. My father never wanted anyone to know. There was only one thing he ever asked of me. She gently pointed toward the final paragraph. Finish it. Adrian wiped his eyes and read the last lines. If my son is reading this, do not honor Michael with a statue. Do not name a building after him. Honor him by treating every person who walks through these doors with the dignity you would have shown him. The day you judge someone's worth before learning their story will be the day you stop deserving this company. Adrian lowered the letter. The silence in the lobby felt heavier than anything anyone had ever experienced. Slowly, he walked toward Elena. For a moment, no one knew what he was going to do. Then, the CEO of Hawthorne Industries, a man known for his pride, lowered his head. I'm sorry. Not for making you wait. Not for refusing to meet you. But for becoming the kind of man my father warned me never to become. Elena smiled through her tears. My father always believed you'd understand one day. She handed Adrian the second envelope. It was always meant for me. He looked at it. Aren't you going to open it? For the first time in 18 years. She broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten sentence. Promise fulfilled. Nothing more. No fortune. No inheritance. No hidden secret. Just 2 words. Because Michael Brooks had never wanted recognition. He only wanted to know that his promise had reached the man it was meant to change. Months later, every new employee at Hawthorne Industries attended an orientation unlike any other. Before they learned about profits, before they learned about company policies, they heard the story of Michael Brooks, not as the man who saved a company, but as the man who proved that true greatness is measured by character when no one is watching. And every morning, as Adrian Cole walked through the lobby, he paused beside the old black-and-white photograph. Not because his father had built the company, but because one forgotten maintenance worker had quietly saved it, and never asked anyone to remember his name. If you had been Adrian Cole, what would have gone through your mind after reading that letter? And do you believe a single act of kindness can change the future of generations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If stories like this remind you that integrity, humility, and compassion still matter, subscribe to Hidden Narrative, where every story reveals a truth worth remembering.